Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, I think we go ahead and get started, inshallah. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين يا خاتم النبيين يا شفيع المذنبين يا أنيس الغريبين يا رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then, we've been talking about Imam Husain AS and lately about Imam Husain AS in Karbala. And last week we were talking about basically on the 10th of Ashura, or 10th of Muharram, which is Ashura, when the fighting started. And initially the friends of Imam Husain AS that had come with him and those that had eventually joined, so roughly about 60 or so people, went out and fought. One thing I forgot to mention last week was that, so one thing I forgot to mention last week was that morning, the way the fighting started was that Amr bin Sa'd, he shot an arrow at the tent of Imam Husain AS and then made an announcement that let it be known that I am the first to shoot this arrow, which is ironic in certain ways, because his father, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, radiallahu anhu, who was amongst the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, amongst Ashar al-Bashara, he was the first to shoot an arrow in the cause of Islam. And that's one of his virtues, one of his things that he's well known for, is that he was the first to shoot an arrow in the way of Allah. And his son is the first to shoot an arrow at the tent of Imam Husain AS on the day of Ashura. Of course, there are many people who try to associate or confuse the actions of the son and the virtues of the father. So, so those who try to confuse this, where the father, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiallahu, is the first to shoot an arrow in the cause of Allah, and the son is the first to shoot an arrow against Imam Husain AS. There shouldn't be any confusion here. You cannot blame the father for the actions of the son unless the father taught the son to do this, which is not the case in this situation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that example in the Quran, where the son of Nuh alayhi salam refuses to get onto the ark and dies as a disbeliever. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when Nuh alayhi salam prays to Allah, for his son, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he's not your son, because his actions are not in line with you. And so the same thing here when we look at Amr bin Sa'd, his actions are totally against what his father stood for. So you cannot blame the father for the actions of the son. In the same way, some people try to blame Muawiyah radiallahu for the actions of Yazid. And you can't do that. So these are things that we have to be very careful with. It's a lot of, people get emotional and without thinking, people will start saying things, and then people listening will get emotional without thinking and start, accusing or blaming people for things that they have no knowledge of. And as we mentioned before, this son was one who was basically disowned by his father to begin with, years before this happened. And the other interesting thing to note here is that Amr bin Sa'd, if you look at him from the beginning, he knew exactly who Imam Husain AS is, and he also understood the consequences of becoming against him. And yet, because of the love of the dunya You know, he was promised to be the governor of Ray, which is modern-day Tehran. So because of that love, he chose to forego his hereafter for a minuscule worldly gain, which is temporary. So this is, we see this, and again, we're seeing this even today. And we'll come to these things, as we move forward. But last week also, we got to the point where those who had come with Imam Husain AS had been martyred. They came all out as a group and fought against the army of Yazid. But what are 60 people going to do against an army of 22,000? And even if I take the least estimate, people that tried to defend Yazid, their estimate of 5,000. I mean, again, what are 60 people going to do against an army, well-equipped army of 5,000? And this is here's where we kind of left off, where Imam Husain AS, he rides forward. And as we know, for the past 8 days, every day, multiple times a day, he's coming in front of this army, giving khutbah after khutbah, explaining who he is, explaining who Yazid is, and why why he is on the path of truth and they are not. And to come against him in itself is falsehood. And he gives them the opportunity of changing their course, changing their fate. But when guidance is withdrawn from the heart, then you see no limits as far as doing evil. Which is also interesting, when guidance enters the heart, there are no limits as far as doing good. So we see this battle between truth and falsehood, taking place. And so here, Imam Husain AS, again, he rides out. And he calls, but this time his calling is different. This time he says, is there anyone who will help the family of Rasulullah ﷺ in their hour of need? And is there anyone who will choose paradise over the fire? And so when he hears these words, he's heard all these words before, but now it hits him in a very different manner. And her, being the first to come against Imam Husain AS, but had the decency of not arresting him, had the decency of making every salat behind him, had the decency of being respectful towards him in all of his interactions, it hits him in such a manner that he immediately jumps on his horse and rides out towards Imam Husain AS, saying that if you can, then you should enter Jannah. And 2 of his sons follow him, and then a couple of other people also follow him. So you have a handful of people that come. And before we get into the conversation between him and Imam Husain AS, the question here is, why did Imam Husain AS come out to call him? What was the purpose? Because, you have, again, an army of 22,000. Even if a handful of them, even if 50 of them had come over, what difference was it going to make? I mean, from a realistic standpoint, as far as, or rather from a worldly standpoint, not a realistic standpoint, from a worldly standpoint, what difference is it going to make if 50 people come over to fight against 22,000? Or rather, 21,950. And it's not going to make any difference. But Imam Husain AS is looking out in this sea of the dwellers of the fire. Because Imam Husain AS is not just anybody. He is the leader of the youth of Jannah. And he is of those leaders who know who their followers are. These are people who, when they look at you, they don't look at what's on top, they look at what is inside of your heart. These are people who look at you through the nur of Allah, so that nothing is hidden from them. These are those who when they see somebody, they not only see the person at that time, but they see that person at the end. So he looks at this sea of all of these people that are going to enter the fire, and he sees amongst them this handful that will enter paradise. This handful who are in the wrong place. And he literally comes out to say to them, look, you don't belong over there, you belong over here. Amongst those who will enter paradise. Your fate is not with them, your fate is with us. And so when Hur hears these words, they penetrate him and penetrate his heart in such a manner that he comes, those who witnessed this, those who were around him, they said that we had never seen him so uneasy or seen anybody so restless at any time as Hur was at that time. And immediately he rides out and he comes before Imam Husain AS, and he gets off of his horse and he meets him and he says to him, he says that I am that wretched person who came against you at the beginning. And if I, sacrifice myself for you, can I be forgiven? Will I be freed from the fire? So Imam Husain AS, he asked him, he says, what is your name? What did your mother name you? And he says, Hur. And Hur means freedom, emancipation. And he says that your mother named you correctly because you have freed yourself from the fire. He says, but my only regret, and then Hur, he says to him, he says that I never thought that it would come to this. I had always thought that these people would make an agreement with you as Muawiyah had made an agreement with him, with your brother. That there would be some terms that would lead to peace. He says, I never expected it to come to this. Which is also why when the fighting started, he did not take part in the fighting. He stood back and kind of watched what was going on. Still with that expectation of, this isn't happening, this isn't going to happen. We aren't going to get to the point of actually fighting against the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's looking upon all of what's had been going on to this point with shock and disbelief. So Imam Husain AS, he says to him, he says, my regret is that you have come to me at a time when I have nothing to offer to you. The hospitality of the Arabs is well known, but the hospitality of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has no limits. And of course, they had nothing at the time. There was no water, no food. So he says, you've come to me at a moment when I have nothing to offer you. And he says, I swear on the day of judgment, I will have you drink from the hawd, from the pool of my grandfather before I drink. And so now these five fight. So these five fight. And of course, they're not hungry and thirsty for 3 days like all the rest of them had been. And, you hear this cry from the other side saying, oh, this traitor, kill this traitor. And so when these fight, they fight very valiantly, and they kill many of those who've come against them. But again, what are 5 people going to do against an army this massive? And so eventually, after killing many of the opponents, they themselves are martyred. And so now, there's no one left, except for those of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the cousins and nephews of Imam Husain AS. And by this time, of course, Salatul Dhuhr. So they make Salatul Dhuhr as Salatul Khawf. It is Friday, it is Jummah, but there is no Jummah in these conditions. there are conditions in which Jummah is forgiven, but Salat, there are no conditions in which Salat itself is forgiven, other than the person be unconscious or insane. So they make Salat as Salatul Khawf, and so Imam Husain AS leads the household, and he of course makes 4 rakat, and everyone behind him, the initial group makes 2 rakat, and then the second group comes and they make 2 rakat, while this other group is guarding. So now what happens is that they start writing out one by one. Or actually, before the one by one, you initially get the brothers of Imam Husain AS. So if you remember, 6 of his brothers, sons of his father Ali, Karamallah Wajh, who are not the sons of Bibi Fatima, Salamullah alayha. But these are the sons of Ali, who, because he married other women after the passing of the daughter of Rasulullah, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so these are sons from other wives of his. And those 6 that were in the battle, or in Karbala at this time, were Abdullah, Ja'far, question about something I said. I'll come back to that question in a little while. So amongst the sons of Sayyidina Ali, or Imam Ali, if you say Imam Ali these days, then you're definitely, he's Shia. Ali is Imam. So Sayyidina Ali Karamallah Wajh, so his sons, you had Ja'far, Abdullah, Abbas, Muhammad, Uthman, and Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhum. So these 6 were there on that day. Abbas, of course, is the flag bearer, so he will not go into the fighting at this moment. 4 of them were, as we mentioned last week, related by tribe to Shimr, who basically is one of the guys running the show at this moment on the opposite side. And he had offered them safe passage the night before. They refused unless Imam Husain AS was also given safe passage. So those 4 are Abbas, Uthman, Ja'far, and Abdullah. So these 4, along with the cousins of Imam Husain AS, who are the sons of Aqil, the brother of Sayyidina Ali, Karamallah Wajh. There are about 4 of them. And one of the grandsons and one of the sons of Muslim bin Aqil, who had been martyred earlier in Kufa days before. So all of them come out to fight. As we mentioned last week, if you look at the names here, so you have Abu Bakr and Uthman, sons of Ali, radiallahu anhu. And then you have one of the sons of Imam Husain AS, whose name is Umar. So you don't name your sons after the sons of your enemies, or you don't name your sons after the names of your enemies, rather. Which also tells us who they loved, because they named their sons after their friends. But in this way also, you have Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman radiallahu anhum being represented in Karbala in the defense of Imam Husain AS. So they are present there, through their namesakes. The question that was asked was, as I mentioned, that conversation between her and Imam Husain AS. So her asked that if I die for you, will I be forgiven and enter paradise? And Imam Husain AS says yes. Of course, martyr is one who dies for Allah. But how do you die for Allah? How are you slain for Allah? Of course, Allah is not in need of any of us. But how are you slain for Allah? Other than fighting in His cause. And Imam Husain al-Islam is the representative of Allah. So dying for him means to die for Allah, because he is that representative, that is the representative of the deen of Allah, the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, Imam Husain al-Islam has the authority to say yes or no, because he is the leader of the youth of Jannah. He is given that authority. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, gave him that authority. And that's why he has no hesitation in saying yes. So now, when the brothers of Imam Husain al-Islam and some of his cousins come forward, so all the brothers with the exception of Abbas, and then, his cousins, so they come and they start the battle. And these are people who have the blood of Ali running through them. Ali is the conqueror of Khaybar. He is the hero of Badr. 36 of the 70 disbelievers that were killed in Badr were killed by Ali directly. And then he aids in another 13. So more than half of them he killed by himself. And another, 1/5 of them he aided in killing. So basically 2/3 of them he's involved in. He is the hero of Uhud, or amongst the heroes of Uhud, and the main hero of Uhud. He is, again, when Khandaq takes place, and Amr bin Abdwud crosses the trench, and then he calls out sarcastically, "Is there anyone who wants to go to paradise, that I may send him to paradise?" And Ali radhiyallahu goes before him, and as Ali radhiyallahu is going, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Kullu iman." All of iman is going. We talk about, at-taharatu nisful iman, that cleanliness is half of iman. Everybody talks about this. When someone gets married, we mentioned the hadith of Rasulullah where he says that, that this is half of your iman, now fear Allah for the other half. So everybody talks about half of iman, half of iman, half of iman. Ali is kullu iman, he is all of iman. And so, when these fight, and they have that blood within them, you can imagine, or rather we can't imagine, the valor, the bravery, the courage, the strength with which they fight. So, they make major headways into the opposing army, But eventually, again, what are 10, 15, even 50, 60, 100 people going to do against 22,000? And so eventually they are also martyred. And as they're being martyred, Imam Husain AS rides out and brings them back to the tents and lays them beside the tent. And I'm going to come to an interesting aspect of this in a few minutes, inshallah. So once all of them are martyred, now the nephews of Imam Husain AS, the sons of his brother Imam Husain AS, ask permission to go, knowing full well what is going to happen, asking permission to sacrifice themselves for him. And so they, however, they don't ride out as a group. Now they ride out one by one. And when they ride out, such as Imam Qasim, who is the son of Imam Husain AS. Imam Husain AS, again, as we mentioned before, had 4 sons in this battle. Qasim, Abdullah, Umar, and Qasim, Abdullah, Umar, and I'm blanking on one of his names. Astaghfirullah. So they, however, these 4, they ride out one by one. And when they ride out, they themselves also give their khutbah before they fight. And the khutbah, of course, again, what are you people doing? And they remind them that in every salat, you say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Who is the al of Muhammad? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Who is the family of Rasulullah? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You say this in your salat, and yet you've come against us. The very people that you claim to be sending blessings upon in your salat. Now you've come against us. So, again, these are the sons of Ali, through his wife Bibi Fatima, salamullah alayha. So they are the grandsons of, the great-grandsons of Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so they fight one by one, and and they also challenge them. They say, look, if you're going to fight us, we're alone, so you send your champions, and we do one-to-one combat. And this is the way it would start out. And when they would realize that, that one-on-one, again, these are people who've been hungry and thirsty for 3 days, but one-on-one they're losing, then they would all gang up and come down upon them all at once. And Imam Husain AS would ride out and pick up their bodies and bring them back to the tents. One thing to note here, at any time here, they could have killed Imam Husain AS. From a worldly standpoint, at any point in this time, they could have attacked him. They could have shot him with an arrow. They could have all attacked him at once. But they don't. Why not? Funny. So when Imam Qasim is martyred, then his brothers are martyred, and one by one Imam Husain AS is bringing them back. And now his two of his nephews, the sons of his sister, Bibi Zainab, of course their names are Muhammad and Aoun. Their father is Abdullah ibn Ja'far, radiallahu anhu. So they asked permission to go out and fight. And Imam Husain AS, initially refuses, but then his sister says that, why do you keep me from attaining this honor? That my son should be martyred defending you. And they're relatively young. Unfortunately, in the books, you'll see where some of these ages have been brought down a good bit. You start looking at things more critically, and then you realize, for example, like Imam Qasim, he's probably in his late, probably around the 20s. Muhammad and Aoun are young men, very young men, but they're still young men. And they go out and they also go out and fight. And these are people, again, they're from this household where eloquence comes from, bravery comes from, honor, dignity, and strength comes from. So when they all ride out, each one of them is giving their khutbah before the fight, offering. These are the ones who have the blood of Rahmatul lil Alameen, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, coursing through their veins. So they ride out and they offer forgiveness for those who have come against them. You still have that opportunity to change your fate and leave those who are of the fire and come to those who are of paradise. But everything they say falls on deaf ears. So then, eventually, the only people that are left, as far as males to fight, are Imam Husain AS, his brother Abbas, and his sons. And he has 3 sons in this battle, or who are with him, not in the battle, but who are with him. His oldest son, Ali Akbar, his second son, Ali Awsat, and his youngest son, Ali Asghar. And Ali Asghar is roughly about 6 months old. So, initially, Ali Akbar, he asked permission to go. And with hesitation, he is eventually given permission to go. And these are people, again, who have been thirsty for 3 days, and I keep reminding us of this because we keep forgetting as we're talking about it. He rides out, and again, he gives his khutbah, making sure that they know who they're coming against, making sure that they know what the consequences are for what they're doing, as well as what the rewards would be if they change their path even now. And he fights them one-on-one initially, and the same thing. He's eventually martyred after they all gang up on him. And Imam Husain AS again rides out and picks him up and brings him back to the tent and lays him down. And in the meantime, his brother Abbas tries to make through to get some water because the women are thirsty, the children are thirsty, everyone is thirsty. You can survive without food for quite a while, but it's hard to go on without water. And so he breaks through, as I mentioned earlier, last week or the week before, you have 4,000 men that have been lined up around the Euphrates and the tributaries that are right there. And so when he goes through, he breaks through the initial lines and eventually gets to the water. And and he fills the water bag and starts making his way back, and then on the way back he's eventually martyred. His arms are cut that he's carrying the water bag with, and then he lays there, and Imam Husain AS, hearing his cries, comes out and eventually picks him up and brings him back to the tent and lays him there. And the water bag, of course, has been shot through it with an arrow, so it's empty. Ali Asghar, who's 6 months old at this point, is crying. And so his mother says to Imam Husain AS, the wife of Imam Husain AS, says to him that, this is a child, maybe they'll have some empathy for the child, so at least ask them to give him some water, at least for the child. And he says, Imam Husain AS says to them, he says, I don't expect anything good from them, but since you're asking, I will take him. And so he rides out with the child, with his baby in hand, and he holds him up in front of the army, and he says, look, your fight is with me. Even if you give some water to this child, what is this child going to do against you? And as he's speaking, one of them shoots an arrow, which hits Ali Asghar and kills him. It also strikes the arm of Imam Husain AS. And of course, Imam Husain AS is now covered with the blood of his 6-month-old child. And then he rides back. And of the martyrs of Karbala, he is the only one who Imam Husain AS buried. So he digs a small grave with his sword and he buries him. Coming back to the question I had asked earlier, which is, at any moment throughout all of this, they could have all attacked him and killed him. They could have, attacked him individually, shot an arrow at him and killed him. But they did not. Part of this is also when there is no guidance, then people have no limits. When guidance is taken away from the hearts, when you have summun bukmun umyum fahum la yarji'un, when you have deaf, dumb, and blind, and just devoid of any direction, you have no limits. And this is what we're seeing today. We see this today, when we're looking at what's going on in the world. All of these children being murdered and killed. What are these children going to do? Nothing. What can these children do against those people that are bombing and shooting and in various other ways killing them? Nothing. They're not just killing their stated targets, but they're killing anyone who is in any way associated with their stated targets. Here the stated target is Imam Husain AS. When there is no guidance in the heart, at least like when we look at things today, we say, oh, those are non-Muslims that are doing this to Muslims. Here you have Muslims, by name, of course, but still Muslims. And amongst them Hafiz, amongst them Qari, amongst them Faqih and Qadi and all of these other titles. And not just a handful of them, hundreds and thousands of them, who, from what we consider knowledge, have so much knowledge, but the hearts are devoid of any guidance because they are not willing to humble themselves before the Messenger ﷺ, which also includes humbling ourselves before the ones that he loves, humbling ourselves before the ones who are created from Him. And so when that doesn't exist, then there is no guidance. And when there is no guidance, there are no limits. And again, with Imam Husain AS in the field of Karbala, if somebody asks, well, why didn't they just, leave everybody else and just kill him? Well, what's happening today? The same exact thing. This is where you get this sadistic mentality, where they want to torture him by killing everything that he loves, destroying everything that he loves. And they're also under that delusion that maybe now he'll give up. We kill his son, so maybe now he'll give up. We'll kill all of his friends and supporters, maybe now he'll give up. Because they want to defeat him. In the sense that, where they make him go away from the truth. Where they make the truth acknowledge the falsehood. But real truth can't acknowledge falsehood. And this is what they don't understand. Or rather, they don't care to understand. And so we see this again, so if that question comes up in our minds or someone asks, why didn't they just, why did they kill the baby? Well, because people try to make up, oh, this is all made up, West of Rullah. No, it's not. Just like what's going on today in the world is not just all made up, like the other side would want you to believe. And today we're even seeing it. And this is what, what happened in Karbala. And so, so this sadistic mindset, sadistic mentality, just psychopathic attitude, basically, literally a bunch of psychopaths. For what? For a bit of the dunya, which isn't going to last, so literally for nothing. But just the mindset of, oh, I'm going to have some dunya. I'm going to have something. So, because they wanted to break him and then make him acknowledge Yazid. This is what they wanted to do. This is what they had, he had made all of these offers and they refused. They said the only thing that's acceptable is that you give your allegiance to Yazid. Anything short of that is not acceptable. Again, the same thing today. We're seeing it in front of us. Which should make it even easier for us to believe all of these things that happened then. Because, a lot of people, oh, where'd you get this? Where did this come from? Well, if you look at the narrations, many of the narrations are through Imam Zain al-Abidin, who will be the only male survivor of this atrocity. But then you also have the accounts of the women, and my father was talking to one person years ago, and that person was saying, oh, the women were in the tent, So how can they be witnesses to this? It was a tent, it wasn't a fort. There were tents. And you think that while things are going on, they're not looking outside? And then you also have the accounts of those who came against them. What in the court of law would be exculpatory evidence. Where the perpetrators of the crimes themselves witness against themselves. Talking about, oh, this is what we did, or what happened. So you have all of those accounts that have been documented. And then you have the hadiths that are undeniable. And we mentioned some of those before, where Imam Husain where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is talking about this, about what will happen to Imam Husain alayhi salam. Will Jibreel alayhi salam and the angel of rain come down? And this whole conversation is taking place in front of Imam Husain alayhi salam. And the hadith is sahih. Even those who try to defend Yazid acknowledge that the hadith is sahih. And then you have other hadiths like in Bukhari and Muslim where Abdullah ibn Umar is asked about the killing of a fly in Ihram by someone who's from Kufa, and he says that you're asking me about the killing of a fly when you had no hesitation in killing Imam Husain, the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So of course, when these women and Imam Zain al-Abidin will eventually make it back to Medina Munawwara, of course they're going to be asked what happened. Of course they're going to tell people what happened. And so after he buries Ali Asghar, and now there is no one left except for him and Ali Awsat, who will eventually become known as Imam Zain al-Abidin. Imam Zain al-Abidin at this time is basically in his late teens, early 20s, more likely late teens. He looks much younger than he is. He also is very sick, has a very high fever, so much so to the extent that he can barely stand up. And at this moment he wants to go and fight in this condition. And Imam Husain al-Islam says no. You cannot go because Rasulullah has said that you will continue this mission forward. And you are to continue this part of the lineage forward. Because the lineage of Rasulullah from his two grandsons, Imam Hassan and Imam Husain alayhi salam, will continue until the end of time. It will be an unbroken chain of lineage, of offspring. And so now, at this point, he rides out. He himself, sallallahu alayhi salam, Imam Husain alayhi salam, rides out on his horse. And again, before any fighting, he gives them a khutbah. He gives them the opportunity to change their path. And even at this point says, look, everything that has happened can be forgiven. The killing of his friends, the killing of his brothers, the killing of his cousins, the killing of his nephews, the killing of his sons, the torture of the women of the household of Rasulullah being put through all of this. He says all of this can be forgiven. Even now, all of this can be forgiven. But again, deaf ears. And the response is that the only thing that's acceptable is that you give bay'ah or allegiance to Yazid. And he refuses. So now the fighting starts, and initially, they come out one at a time, and they fall very quickly, and then he starts making headway through their ranks. And eventually, when they realize that they're not getting anywhere, they're all falling before him. Because, this is Imam Husain. This is the direct son of the conqueror of Khaybar. You know, when Khaybar was conquered, Ali radiallahu, during that process, ripped off the gate of Khaybar with his left arm and used it as a shield. And then after he was done with it, he threw it behind his head, you know, over his back, like 80 feet. And it took several men just to pick the gate up. This is the one to whom, at the beginning of the Battle of Khaybar, Rasulullah says that I will hand the flag over tomorrow to the one who loves Allah and His Messenger and is loved by Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And all of the companions said that they never wanted a position, and Umar radiallahu is the one who verbalized this, never wanted any position except for that. Because this was a guarantee from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whoever this will be. And then the next day he called Ali. So this is Imam Husain AS going through these ranks in such a way that they can't withstand him. And then they all start shooting arrows. And the arrows hit him, and at this point, you know, it is time for Asr. As I mentioned, I guess last week or the week before, it was October. The month was October from a solar standpoint. And so the days are getting shorter. And so by this point, time for Asr has started. And when we look at the verses in Surah Baqarah that we spoke about last week, in verse number 153, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah, inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. O you who believe, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, O you who have iman, seek help with patient perseverance and salat. And for Allah is with those who have, or who practice, or who show sabr. And so, at this point, when Imam Husain AS realizes, or rather knows, realization is something that kind of hits you all of a sudden, something they may not have recognized before. But Imam Husain AS knows that he's not going to make it through. So he gets off of his horse, and it is time for Asr. So he falls, he can barely stand, so he falls and he starts to make his salat in that condition. You have people who say stupid things. And as we say here in the South, you can't fix stupid. You can fix many things, but you can't fix stupid. Because if somebody doesn't know, you can educate him, and now he knows. But when someone is stupid, it's just something that's doesn't matter what you do. So there was one guy who was, a lot of people say a lot of things, and I'm going to go over some of the things people say, but one of this guy that, someone sent me a clip, and he's asking, he says, well, was the sajda of salat, or was the sajda that he was martyred in just a regular sajda? Because how did he make wudu? There was no water, there, and just stupidity. One is, when there is no water, there are other ways of making wudu. Obviously, this guy who's supposed to be, this Amir of huge Jamaat doesn't even know what tayammum is. But here Imam Husain AS didn't make tayammum either. Tayammum is again, the way you make wudu if there's no water. You use dust. Imam Husain AS is making Salatul Ishq. When we make Salat, and we spoke about this past Friday a little bit when we spoke about the Salat of Sayyidina Ali Karamallahu Wajh. Kind of alluded to certain things. Didn't really go into a lot of details on a lot of things. But when we make Salat, we are in front of our Lord. And of course, for Allah, there is no front or back or side, right or left or whatever. Allah is Allah. But for us, we are in the presence of our Lord. And so everything around us goes away, or should go away. Everything from this dunya should be gone. But the salat should be an exhibition of love. And in love, one forgets himself. In ishq, one forgets himself. He only knows his beloved. And so for the believer, he should be in that condition where he has forgotten himself and he is focused totally on his beloved. Salatul Ishq we see in the battlefield where you make wudu with your own blood. Because you have sacrificed everything for your beloved. Of course, Imam Husain AS at this point is covered in his own blood. But that blood isn't just any blood. And I'm going to kind of go off onto a side note here, which is very important. Surah 33, verse 33. And a part of that verse. The first part of the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, and stay quietly in your houses and make not dazzling display like that of the former times of ignorance, and establish regular prayer and give zakat and obey Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then the second part of the verse, it says, Innama yuridu Allah. Innama, it is only Allah's will. Innama yuridu Allah. It is only the will of Allah. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. And Allah only wishes to remove all abomination from you, O members of the family, to make you pure and spotless. And then verse 34 goes back to addressing the wives of Rasulullah. When I look at this part of the verse, إنما يريد الله, that it is only Allah's intention, it is only Allah's will, and there is no separation between the intention and the doing of Allah. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. That is only Allah's will, His intention, that to remove all abomination from the members of the family of Rasulullah ﷺ and make you pure and spotless. There are people today who say, oh no, if you look at this, at the context of the verse, then this is, the first part of the verse is addressed to the wives of Rasulullah ﷺ. The second part of the verse is addressed, or the next verse, not the second part of the verse. The next verse is also addressing the wives of Rasulullah ﷺ. So then this middle part The second part of this first verse is also addressing the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And under normal conditions, that would be accurate. Because context of what's being said is one of the most important aspects of understanding the Quran. Unless you have a direct statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself explaining something. And we have that in this verse. And you have more than 14 hadith marfu. Hadith marfu are hadith that go back to the companion who heard it directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these hadith marfu aren't just any hadith marfu. You're talking about say hadith. You can have hadith marfu that is hasan or gharib or daif or whatever else, various other aspects of the classifications. We're talking most of these are say hadith. When the verse is revealed, Rasulullah is in the household of his wife Salama radiallahu anha, which is interesting because she is also the wife that was in whose household he was when Jibreel al-Islam came with the angel of rain to talk about Karbala. So he's in her household, and when this verse is revealed, he calls for Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam. He calls for them, and when they arrive, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent a gift for you. And he takes them under his cloak as he's reciting this verse, and he says, Allahumma ha'ulahi ahli, which if you look at grammatically, literally means that, oh Allah, only these are my family. Allahumma ha'ulahi ahli, that only these are my family. And when Bibi Salama, when she sees this, she wants to get under the cloak as well, and he motions to her, no, you are good where you are. He says to her, you are good where you are. This is not for you. And Imam Tahawi, he says that when not even the one in whose house the verse was revealed was allowed under the cloak, then who is anybody else to claim that somebody else was under that cloak? So there are people today who try to explain this by saying that, these four had some ridges, some filth attached with them, so Rasulullah was removing that by taking them under the cloak. Astaghfirullah. And their statement could have some credibility if Rasulullah himself wasn't under the cloak. He himself is under the cloak, and with him are these four. And then you have multiple ahadith which are where it talks about every morning. After this verse was revealed, Rasulullah would go in front of the house of Bibi Fatima salamullah alayha and stand at the door reciting Innama yuridullah, reciting that part of the verse, saying that, oh, Allah has cleansed you, O my household. So the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has purified, how can he be impure? And if someone has an issue with, no, I don't accept this. Well, it's not your will. It is Allah's will. Innama yuridullah. Allah says it's only Allah's will. If you don't accept it, big deal. It's not your will, it's Allah's will. Historically, the only one who disputed this was a guy named Ikramah. whose name does come, he is a narrator of a hadith. He is a narrator of some of the hadiths that are in Bukhari. But Akrama was the slave of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, and then became the property of the son of Abdullah ibn Abbas, Masud ibn Abdullah ibn Abbas. Eventually he's freed because Masud would beat him because he would lie against the household. He made his way to Egypt, and he would go in the marketplace and cry out. And in the marketplace, he said, "Oh, people, this verse isn't about the one who you think about it is, that you think. It's about the lives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If he's accurate, then why is he going in the marketplace just yelling this out? And why is he saying to the people who, again, this is the time of the companions of Rasulullah, oh, it's not about the people that you think it's about." So this stupidity that, oh, Imam Husain AS, how could he make salat? He didn't have wudu. I mean, that's just stupidity. The one whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has purified, who Rasulullah says Allah has purified you. What is the first condition for salat? Purification. We make wudu. I don't even know if my wudu is accepted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given me any guarantee of the acceptance of my wudu. Yet he's given guarantee of the purification of Imam Husain AS. He's one of those who was under the cloak. So in that condition of salat, when he's in sajda, is when Shimr comes and martyrs him, beheads him. And of course, as he's beheading him, he says, Allahu Akbar. Making takbir. As they're killing a grandson of Rasulullah, the flower, whom Rasulullah, these are the flowers of my house. So, there's so many aspects of this. But again, today, for the next week, read through those verses again of Surah Baqarah. 152 through 157. So 152 through 157. And as you're reading those verses, think about Karbala. Think about Imam Husain AS, and think about, everyone who's there with him. And it should make it easier for us to understand everything that's going on today as well. But we should also understand that the victory is truly Imam Husain AS, because he obtained the objective that he wanted, which was to wake the ummah up, and we will see that as we move forward, as to the reaction that happens after Karbala within the ummah and how the people respond. And you see an empire that should have lasted centuries fall within 90 years. In less than 90 years. So we will see this, as we move forward. But the other aspect here is, of course, they martyr him. It's the time of Asr. And as I mentioned when we were talking about this before, it's one of those things that I've talked about before. if you read the Quran, there are only 2 times that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by 2 timings of the day. He doesn't swear by Dhuhr, he doesn't swear by Maghrib, he doesn't swear by Isha. He swears by 2 times. Wal Fajr and Wal Asr. And so the question is, what is significant about these 2 times versus all the rest of the times? And Fajr is easy because Fajr is the time of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, he is born when? Right at dawn, just as the time of Fajr is beginning. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by that time. Asr, and if you read the verse thinking about Karbala, then a lot of it makes a lot more sense. It falls into place. And one thing to note here is that the Quran is not simply a book that reminds us of the past. It's a book that also shows us what's going on at the moment, and a book that tells us what is to come. And the Quran has always been like that, and will always be like that. So you look at, so for somebody to say, oh, you know, well, Asr, you know, Karbala hadn't happened then. Well, many things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that happened that hadn't happened then, and yet we see them happening then, afterwards. So you look at Asr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by Asr, which is the time of the martyrdom of Imam Husain AS. And then he says, what? Innal insana lafi khusr. Truly mankind is lost. What was going on in Karbala? 22,000 against not even 100. Those who had come against truth, they were all lost. And then it says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Except those who have Iman and do righteous deeds and enjoying the truth. Of course, Imam Husain AS, at that, he is the truth. He is enjoining the truth. And have patience and constancy. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And they enjoin patience. They are patient. And you look at the patience of Imam Husain AS throughout all of this, never once complaining. Throughout all of this, always going to the enemy and telling them you still have that opportunity to save yourselves. Always in that mindset. And I'm going to stop here. Inshallah, we'll continue from here next week, and then try to get into some of the aftermath of Karbala and why, you know, the actions of Imam Husain AS were successful. Because he achieved the goal, which was to wake the Ummah up, and we'll see how that occurred. With various aspects, various revolutions coming through, various revolts and rebellions occurring against this tyranny. And tyranny here, not, you know, the physical tyranny is one thing, but the spiritual tyranny is the main thing. And so these same people who are claiming to be the leaders of the Muslims, and at the same time trying to destroy everything, trying to destroy the soul of Islam. And again, this is exactly what we're seeing today. All of this, exactly what we're seeing today. And this is also why they don't want us knowing, why there's been so much effort, concerted effort for the people not to know what happened in Karbala, not to know the steps that Imam Husain al-Islam took and why he took those steps. Because it exposes what's going on. It makes it easier to see through the fitna of today. So, inshallah, I'll end here. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, yes.
You've, not a very smart question, but when Yazid was elected was it by his father, Muawiyah?
Yeah, see, we spoke about this. I don't think you were here when we did, and I'll go over
I
that.
don't think I was here.
Yeah, so I'll reiterate that a little bit. And this was, so basically when we look at, and if you look back at some of the older videos, which weren't too old, last few months, when we talk about like Imam Husain al-Salam, so when he handed over the rule, and we went into why he did what he did, and this is actually an important point that I want to go ahead and make right now, and I'll reiterate this next week too here, since you've asked this question, and it's part of the question. So Imam Husain al-Islam, he laid out the groundwork, or the criteria, or the conditions rather, of handing over the rule. And of the conditions, first condition was that you will rule according to the Quran and the Sunnah and the way of the Khulafai Rashidin. Second condition was that the cursing of Ali has to stop from the minbar. In this one, Imam Husain al-Islam compromised, in that Muawiyah said that I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for anyone else. So Imam Husain al-Islam accepted that. The third condition was that there would be no retaliation against the supporters of his father Ali and his own supporters. The fourth condition was that the governors or the appointees of Muawiyah would have no right to tell the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam what to do. They couldn't order them anything. And then the last condition was that he had no right to appoint anybody as his heir, or to take his place, and that after him the rule would either come back to Imam Husain al-Islam or to the Shura. Okay. So these were the conditions that were laid out. And this also shows several things. One is that, people say that, Imam Husain al-Islam, he gave bay'ah to Muawiyah radiyallahu, which anyone who understands what bay'ah is, that's not how bay'ah is done. When I give bay'ah to my shaykh is laying out the conditions, I am accepting the conditions, because I'm giving bay'ah. Here, Imam Husain al-Islam is laying out the conditions, Muawiyah radiyallahu is accepting the conditions. So that claim that he gave allegiance to him, or bay'ah to him, it falls away right away. Also, the fact that none of his appointees had any authority over this household disproves that claim as well. And these criteria are not mentioned, I'm not referring to books of the Shia. Ibn Hajar Asqalani mentions these conditions, Ibn Hajar Haythami mentions these conditions. So these are from the books of the Sunni scholars, legitimate Sunni scholars. Because there are people who deny, oh no, it wasn't part of the criteria. Yes, it was, and it's in there. And I could give more references, but those two should be enough. So the understanding was that after Muawiyah, the rule would come back to Imam Husain al-Islam. This also brings up the point here that because there are other people, for lack of a better term, you can't fix stupid, who claim that, Imam Husain al-Islam was for the peace, but Imam Husain al-Islam was against it, which, and again, the stupidity of that is amazing, because if I look at what happens when Imam Husain al-Islam, one is, Imam Husain al-Islam accepts the authority of his brother, and there's no doubt in that. The other thing is that Imam Husain al-Islam quietly accepts all of the issues that came with this agreement. When Imam Hassan al-Islam is making this agreement, it's not for himself. It is for the good of the ummah of Rasulullah. It is so that no more blood of not even a single drop of blood of the ummah will be spilt because of him, because of this situation. And that's why he hands over the rule, because he knows that Muawiyah is not going to stop, and this is the only way to make this end. And also he knows that the Khilafah has ended at 30 years. And so he hands it over. Imam Hassan al-Islam doesn't object. And then even after Imam Hussain al-Islam does not object, and even after Imam Hussain al-Islam is martyred, poisoned, around 50 Hijri, Imam Husain al-Islam continues to honor the terms from his standpoint. So if he had issues with it, he could have said, no, I don't honor these terms anymore. But he didn't. So now, when Imam Hassan al-Islam is gone, now the question comes up, who will become the ruler after Muawiyah? And there were still companions who had lived through the first civil war, in which thousands of companions were martyred. And they didn't want to see that again. So you have some of them, mainly Mughira bin Shu'bah, suggesting to Muawiyah that you need to appoint someone, because otherwise we may end up in another civil war, which is going to come anyway, because of what Yazid was going to do. But of course, in their mindset at this point, they're not seeing that. They're just saying, okay, if there is a power vacuum, and there is fighting, or if there's a power vacuum, there will be fighting, and then you're going to have another civil war. So this is when he appoints, so roughly around 55, 56 Hijri, he eventually makes this appointment that Yazid will be the ruler after me. And so he sends this message to all of the governors and tells them to take allegiance on behalf of Yazid. And Yazid, if you look at his history, before this point, drunkard, womanizer, all of these things. But then, when you want to attain something, you clean up your act for a while, which is what he does. So now he becomes that good son, And so then, yes.
I'm sorry. You said so. Basically, Muawiyah breaks that.
Yes, he does. He does. So he violated that clause, but with, I guess, his ijtihad was that, well, conditions have changed, and so that clause is no longer valid. That's his ijtihad. Okay? Whether it's accurate or not is a different issue. And, other than him and maybe one or two other people, if you look at the reaction of the established companions of Rasulullah at that time, they all reacted negatively to it. Because when Marwan bin Hakam makes the announcement, and this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, and you also have Mustadrak al-Hakim and all of these, which are Sahih hadith, where when the announcement is made in Medina Munawwara, the most vocal one against this is Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And so when Marwan makes this statement, and Marwan, he made the statement that, Muawiyah is doing like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had done, so he's like Abu Bakr had appointed Omar, Muawiyah is appointing Yazid as his heir. And so Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr stands up and he says that, that this action of Muawiyah isn't the action of Abu Bakr or Omar, it is like the action of Qaisar. The words are very rough. They were in a position where they could say that because they are companions of Rasulullah and they have full authority to make those statements. We are not. So we have to be very careful when we look at this. If you have time, if you can go back and look at those previous videos, I went into this in somewhat more detail. And then, and I'm sure I've left out some stuff. So if you can look at that, that will clarify some things, but then we can go over some other aspects of that as well. But that would kind of simplify things a little bit, and kind of make it a little bit easier. But I went over that. Like I said, it's been, if you look back at when we were talking about Imam Husain AS, it will be covered in that, inshallah. Wa yakum. But again, these are things that are important to know properly, so that you don't fall into that trap like the Shia fall into, where they start cursing everyone. But again, the companions of Rasulullah are not masum; they are mahfuz. So they made mistakes, but we also need to look at how they made tawbah for their mistakes. And I went over that as far as Ma'aviyah as well. So look at that, and then and I'm sure there will still be questions, and then that way we can kind of makes it easier for me to answer the question, inshallah. But that is an important point to note and to understand, because how could a person like Yazid, and this becomes a big question, how could a person like Yazid become the king, and especially at the time that he became the king? And so there's a lot of stuff that happened in the background, and this will also get to that point that I'm going to start making next week, inshallah, when we talk about the aftermath of Karbala and why the actions of Imam Husain AS are so successful in literally shocking the ummah back to life. Because people's concept these days is, I pray and I fast and I make hajj, and that's all Islam is, and that's not it. If you don't do any of these things with the correct attitude, then none of those things matter. So.
Like you said, one of the things is that, like, Muawiyah made the rule that now we can go by succession and hereditary, where it was shura.
Yes.
So you basically changed the culture and the law of election. And secondly, like you said, everybody at the time, I would assume, knew his character, what kind of person he is. Yes, maybe he had, like you said, cleaned up his act, maybe a few months, maybe a year, maybe two, but people who would know him, they would know him he's not fit to be the leader of the Muslims.
Yes.
The first virtue should be you are irreproachable and has great virtue. That's how Abu Bakr and Omar and Uthman and Ali got elected. That was the first thing. And so it's a big change from the classic teaching.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge shift. Of course, Rasulullah SAW had already told us that this was coming when he mentioned Khilafah for 30 years, and then he said cruel monarchy, Jabr. And so this is what we see. And this is also interesting when you look at all these kings afterwards. Every one of them claimed to be Khalifa. Okay, but they were kings. And so, and this is how they have distorted, these same kings later on distorted that concept of, you can't say anything against the leader. And this is how they maintain power. And this is what we're seeing today. And so, again, when a lot of this will get clearer as we keep going ahead. But if you look back at what we've talked about before, it will also become clearer as well, inshallah.
Like you said, I'm sorry, but this is one last point I was going to say.
Yes.
It's just unrelated, but yet related, because you said they have changed things and opened books. I was just listening yesterday to one of those mashayikh about something different, and as I was listening to him, it became clear that he did his study in Saudi Arabia. He's very pleased Wahhabi women, and somebody asked a question at the end of everything, and he said, what do you think about the manifestations for Palestine, and what do you think about the students who are basically changing the awareness, and alhamdulillah, things are looking up for us, and at least at a minimum of the heart of the people. And he's like, well, listen to a mashayikh in Saudi Arabia, and they say, those manifestations are, it's very difficult to say that they're halal, they're most likely been haram, because there are certain rules and certain things and this, and so unfortunately, that's the only thing we have at this point. Pushback.
Yeah, so see,
people just say don't do it, so we just lay down and die.
well, that's what they want. They want us to lay down and not do anything, and they can do everything. And this is why, they give all of these fatwas, and they quote these various ahadith totally out of context. And this is nothing new.
It's nothing new, but
yeah.
like you said, they don't pretend anymore because
Yes.
by saying that, even a neutral person who doesn't know their heart can tell that there's something wrong. They basically have an agenda with the enemy. By
Yeah.
telling the people do not go manifest, basically telling them, let them win, let them
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
let them
Exactly.
follow and shout.
Yep. And this is because they want everybody just to lay down, and that way they can do whatever they want to do. This is exactly why understanding this aspect of Islam, which is a major aspect of Islam, because the household of Rasulullah are the people who guide us to understand the Quran. And if you read those verses, it mentions that. So if we don't even know them, if we don't know what they did, why they did what they did, and how they did it, then then this is our situation and our plight now, because if you talk to your average Sunni, and I'm using the term Sunni very broadly here. If you talk to your average Sunni about Karbala, or about Imam Husain AS, or Imam Zayd, or Imam Muhammad Zakiya, they are clueless, totally clueless. And this is what the powers to be want, because again, it makes it so much easier to control the masses that way. When the people start realizing, Rasulullah said that I have come to perfect character, so character matters. So when the people start realizing that character matters, and the character of the people as well as the character of the ruler matters, then that becomes an issue for the ruler. And this is why you have who's that? Sudesh. Sudesh. Of course, he's the imam of and I hate using that word, but he leads the salat in or whatever salat that is. I don't even know if you can call it salat. Behind these people, but he leads the prayers in Mecca. He is in charge of the imams of the Haramain, both Mecca and Medina. He's the one who organizes them and decides who's who. And then, he's been making these pro-enemies of Islam statement for years. And this is why he was confronted years ago by an Egyptian man at a gathering, and they of course pick up the guy and throw him out. So this isn't again new, but now they're just blatantly open about it, and don't even try to hide it. So this is an ongoing thing.
That's my point. It's blunt. Like,
yes.
I would even feel ashamed to say something like, "No, do not manifest."
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Because no, that's against the leaders. You're creating fawda and fitna. Excuse me? I mean, like you said, this is clear.
Yes.
That you are in bed with the enemy. I mean, that's the only way to read it.
So inshallah we will continue with this, other points will come up as we keep going, and other points will become clearer, inshallah. And this is why consistency is important with anything, because of course we can't cover everything in a day, and this is one of the lessons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us when He revealed the Quran over 23 years. It takes time to absorb. Yes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and protect us and make us understand and fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He give victory and support to our brothers and sisters in Gaza that are being oppressed over their oppressors. and may He wake us all up and allow us to stand for what's right.
Not just about the whole Palestine. Not just about the
Yes, all of Palestine and all of Palestine and wherever people and Muslims are being oppressed, and which literally is the whole world. It's just different forms of oppression. So Allah help us all. Yes, yes. So Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Right.